On this week's episode of the Jesse T Show, the amazing, mighty, and powerful Tori Gordon, mindset and success coach, founder of Coachable. Tori, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's exciting to have you. We connected and the universe said it was time to leave each other better than we found one another, so to speak. And I know that you're really big on mindset and performance, and you lead your clients and the people that you're in their lives, and you show them how to become more successful and how to have the right mindset shifts for things that they need. And you have a crazy, amazing story.
Thank you.
For those, the few people, you're welcome, in the world that haven't heard of you yet, wanted to share you with the world and, let the world hear your journey.
Yeah. I hope it helps somebody.
Yeah, I think it will. So tell the world a little bit about Tori Gordon.
Yeah. Dang. Well, thank you for that intro. Yeah. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
A little about me. I think my whole life, I grew up in Alabama to two professors. So being in a household around educators, it was really, really important to read and to just care about education and all of that. And I learned, I think at a really young age, that when I did well at things, I got praised for it. And so I think for me, there was this strategy of learning to perform at a really young age that set in really as a protective mechanism. But it felt good. You know, we all want acceptance and belonging and love. And when I made a good grade, or I made a sports team, or I was the head in the play, everybody talked about it. And I liked that attention as a kid. And so I got really accustomed to, being that shining good kid.
Yep.
And so I think after years and years of doing that, my identity really got wrapped up in it. And so I found myself in my mid-20s really climbing corporate ladders, killing it in the sense of what a lot of people consider as success. Had a mortgage, had well over 6 figures, had a serious relationship. All of the boxes were checked, and life happened. I had some really serious losses that caused me to reflect on what was really important.
Yep.
And ask myself if the life that I was living was the life I thought I had in my head. The life that if you'd asked me, if we're sitting down at dinner and you're like, what are the things you really value? I would have probably said, I really value family. Like, I really value relationships with people. I value making memories and play and fun and all these things. But my life said, you're exhausted.
Yep.
You're isolated. You're stretched too thin. You're ignoring your body. All these things. And so I saw this gap, like, widening of who I thought, like, the life I thought I had and the life I actually was living. And I had to get clear on what I wanted. And so through a lot of self-discovery, a lot of honest assessment, realized that I needed a new path and that I wasn't on my path. And so as part of that, I started my company Coachable, which is a mindset and performance coaching and consulting for personal and corporations. And started a podcast, and now here I am talking to you.
That's awesome. I'm glad it brought you to me, so we can have this conversation. So there's a lot to unpack there in terms of I want to know about the catalyst that was this kind of change for you to go on your journey, to seek understanding, to understand like what was really important to you, and kind of instead of being the person that just checked the boxes because that was the thing to do, like you really learned what was important, number one, and then talk about some of those pinnacle moments. I know that you've shared this with me in prior conversation, but some of those losses that you had that really kind of like changed your mindset to be able to go down that path that you needed to go now.
Yeah. It started when I was a senior in high school. I had an older sister, Anna, who was a senior at the University of Alabama. And she had strep throat. It was about finals week-ish. And we got a diagnosis that she was sick with acute myeloid leukemia. And that really rocked us as a family. because we were not prepared nor expecting anything like this. Somebody that's brilliant and bright and thriving and healthy,
Yep.
you know, that's not something any family is ready for, much less knows kind of how to, what does that path look like.
Yep.
So it was at that point I was going off to school. My mom and Anna went to kind of live in the hospital for almost 2 years. We spent 2 Christmases in the hospital.
Wow.
My dad was commuting to work and then commuting to the hospital, and he was trying to keep it all together. And I was going off to college for the first time. And so there was a lot, like, there wasn't much attention on me anymore.
Sure.
You know, it was kind of, Tori, just, for me, I said the best thing I can do is not make anybody worry about anything else. You know, we're all focused on Anna's survival and her health, and if I could stay out of the way and get good grades and continue to be the good girl that I was, then we could focus on what really mattered.
Sure.
But that's a big time in anyone's life.
Huge transition, yeah.
Huge transition. So I think I was, instead of really figuring out what I wanted to do and who I was, we were all a little distracted.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a life-changing, you know, you immediately hear those things. And you know, we talked about this. I have relatives that have been through cancer and have lost their battle with cancer after an amazing fight with it and things like this. But you're never ready. You're never prepared for the journey. You're never prepared for the worst of the worst. And you hope for the best the whole time. And you do what you can. And you shifted, even though you weren't quite ready. You did shift. You went from all eyes on you, attention being to you based off your good deeds, so to speak, and like what you could accomplish, to taking a back seat. And even that was a transition too. Yeah,
it was. And I was okay with it. I think the biggest thing that I learned during that time was life, you can't prepare for everything. There's no amount of preparation for school or preparation for whatever life happens, and that will just halt you in your tracks and say, okay, let's take a step back here, let's reassess. And so over the course of that 2 years, Anna was in and out of remission, saw her really, really struggle. She went through 2 bone marrow transplants, and saw my mom and my parents struggle with the fear of their daughter
losing
being
their child.
Sick.
Yeah.
So we started as a family to grapple with some really big questions.
Which were?
How does this happen?
Yep.
What do we do? Why us? Where's God in this? How do we move forward? What if?
Yep.
All those things. And I remember my dad sitting us down as a family at one point and saying, we have 2 choices, hope or despair.
There you go.
We're going to choose
There's
hope.
no alternative. Yeah.
So let's get in line with that. And if you have fears, we all do, but this is going to be the heartbeat of where we're going from now on. And that stuck with me. He led our family in that way, which was so good. And Anna fought for 2 strong years until chemo really wore on our body. And so losing Anna really was sobering because she was so healthy and had so much
vibrant
life.
Yeah.
And it was just gone. And so it was a lot to process. And then, right before Anna passed, about 3 weeks before that, a huge tornado came through Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I grew up. It left us kind of out of our house for a good portion of the time.
Where were you living at this point?
I was in college, so I had an apartment, but it was our family home that we grew up in. So that was traumatic and
being
devastating
displaced.
in itself.
Yep.
Hundreds of people died that day. And then Anna passed a couple weeks later. We're all just kind of in this, what the hell
shock.
Is happening?
Yeah.
And then back to back, we lost my dad's mom, my dad's dad, my mom's mom, and my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer.
My goodness.
Yeah, so it was like a blow after blow after blow. And literally every time it was like that we went to process what we'd gone through, or that we tried to just take a step back and breathe, we were hit with something else. So I learned to be on guard a lot.
You couldn't relax.
I was in survival mode. We all were for a very long time. When my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, they diagnosed her with 5 years to live, and she lived for 5 years and 2 weeks. And so, experience all that loss, it became extremely clear to me that I'm more than just a body. Because I'd been with Anna, I'd been with my mom, I'd been with all these other relatives, and they weren't there anymore. And so it made me ask the question, okay, here's their body, where are they? Because I know what they're like, and this isn't them. You know what I mean? And so it led me down much of a spiritual path of what happens, where do we go, and asking those bigger questions that a lot of times my religious background kind of left open-ended, and these questions in a lot of ways threatened what I believed in a lot of ways too. And so that was big. So I lost my mom in April, 10 days before my 27th birthday. And so a lot of that happened, and I'm just like, when Mom died, it was the first time my dad and I could kind of breathe, because there was no imminent danger for us. And we really didn't know what to do with ourselves.
Because you're so used to the chaos.
Yeah.
So used to the strain of these issues.
And I'd gotten really good at thriving despite all of that. And compartmentalizing my life. You know, like, home is home, but then at work, you say, like, that was my outlet. Like, I had other outlets to kind of get away from all of that. But now I had a lot to process that I hadn't for like 10 years.
For sure. A lot of things to let go.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, get back in touch with yourself.
Yeah, and so I did that, and then really started looking at my life and thinking, time's all we have, clearly. I have the opportunity to be here and to do something with my time, and as long as I do that, I need to make sure that's meaningful and that that's on purpose. And it wasn't until I had that space and time to really process and heal that I realized the way that I was living and what I was doing every day wasn't my higher purpose, and that I meant to do so much more. And so then I went on this kind of journey of figuring out what that looked like and how I could help people.
So thanks for sharing all that. I mean, that's incredible, the journey that you've been on, and it's heart-wrenching to think that so much can happen in such a short amount of time to the closest people that you love. And we shared these stories before we connected here on the podcast. I've been through a lot of similar issues and a lot of very things you'll never be prepared for, no matter how advanced you are, how much you've learned, how much you've seen. At the end of the day, when it comes to those types of things, they're so final, and there's never enough time. Even though time is all we have, there's just never enough time. So you have to make the most of it, right? And so, thank you so much for sharing that, because I know that's a huge scars, right? Like it's got to be hurtful in a sense, but to move into a positive mentality about it and say, now I'm going to grow and move forward. And you went on a journey, and there's a few different things you did specifically within that journey. Share that a little bit.
Yeah, and this is something I talk to with my clients about a lot. It's really the way that we see the world is how we're going to experience it. And so I had a lot of reasons, if you looked at my life, to say, life's hard. Life pulls the rug out from under you. Life tells me that I just have to take the cards I'm dealt. Fill in the blank there. That could have been my mentality. I think a lot of that has to go with where my dad pointed us initially with hope, but in my own personal belief and a greater purpose. And so I was always seeking that out of, what does this mean? Why? What can I learn from this, or how can this change me for the better? So I kind of had that lens, but like you said, I had a lot of my own processing to do. So I initially started going to therapy, and got so much out of it. I wanted to destigmatize it
Sure.
for a lot of people.
Sure. Talk a little, because I've been through therapy before, counseling, and it started off as leadership coaching for me. I found a guy who was an amazing human being that I was in corporate America, and I just wanted to level up and be a better leader, and it turned into full blown I've had a crazy life. Help me, kind of thing.
Comes out,
right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
How did that look like for you, and how did you find them, and what were some of the things you were able to kind of identify and move on with?
Yeah. So actually, so much of my healing and true, I think, therapy and healing happened outside of the therapist's office.
For sure.
I did do some traditional therapy. It helped ignite kind of my process. I think we got to have some good conversations that got me thinking actually a lot about my relationship with my mother and how much the dynamic between parent and child is so interesting. You think you know them, and you do, but you know them for the way that
You don't know them completely.
you've perceived them.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I lost her that I found myself wanting to go back and ask her questions, get to know her. What was she like when she was 28? What were her aspirations? Did she, before she was told or she realized she had to do certain things, who did she want to be? And I couldn't ask that anymore. So that got me really thinking. Then I got hooked on a podcast. It's the Over It and On With It podcast with Christine Hassler, who is an incredible teacher, spiritual healer. I was really looking for stuff that I resonated with.
Yep.
And that felt good to me. That I just remember hearing something that she talked about, a quarter life crisis, about being kind of in this crisis phase of who am I, what am I about, what do I want to do, and how much pressure is put on you at a certain age.
That's right.
To have it figured out. And I didn't I felt like I had a mask on that showed everybody else I had it figured out,
Yep.
but on the inside I didn't. And so started consuming her stuff. I heard about a retreat that she was having in Maui and put in some information, asked for some information and got a call that they had one spot left. And the retreat was going to be in 3 months. It was quick.
Yeah.
And it was the most expensive room they had available. But when I got that call, I remember intuitively knowing that was for me.
It was right. Yeah.
And they say in that retreat, you do 10 years of therapy in 10 days. It was a lot.
Yeah.
But I started to cry because I'd never invested in myself or financially the way that I did for that retreat, but knowing my life was going to be different.
Yep.
After I went there. And I had that expectation. I was like, this is going to help me. This is going to change me in the best way. And so I did. I went. I was exposed to so much in terms of just how powerful I am.
For sure.
And how much I've been limiting myself, not just consciously, so much subconsciously, and all of the work that I got to do to heal a lot of old stuff that wasn't serving me anymore.
Yep.
And it was really, it took a lot of courage to do it, but it changed my life. It saved my life and set me on a path of realizing that I didn't have to just compare myself to everybody else anymore. Now I started seeing life through the lens of this is what's possible. That's what I could be doing if I wanted to. If I was brave enough, if I had the courage to do it, I could do anything I wanted. I could be anybody I wanted to be. And so, I just started consuming as much as I could all the time and being open to doing some deeper emotional healing work, which we did on that trip.
Going on this retreat, it showed you how powerful you were. It showed you what you were capable of and that you were limiting yourself so much. What were some of the exercises, or even we call them ceremonies, they had you perform while you were out there to come to these realizations, and what did you walk away from that retreat with?
Yeah. Right out of the gate, day one, we did something that I intend to do with my clients in person, because I want to facilitate this type of experience for people. It was the see and be seen exercise. We got partners and we stood across a room from them, and you were to lock eyes with them, and you could not break eye contact. And you were able to use hand gestures. So if I were calling you, I could say, come forward, go back, or stay. And the idea was to get as close as you could to the other person and look, not ever losing eye contact. And in that exercise, is you're with somebody, you have no idea who they are. You're silent.
Yep.
And all they're doing is staring at you.
It can make you feel very uncomfortable.
Incredibly intimidating for a lot of people.
For sure.
Some people immediately went to tears because they felt so much attention on them.
Yep.
For the first time. For a lot of people, we're good at not having attention on ourselves.
Hiding,
or
wearing a
directing that somewhere else.
Yep.
You know, we're hiding behind comedy or hiding behind whatever it is. And so it brought a realness very, very quickly to it. But it allowed you also, if I were to call you forward, send you back, recognize how much we do based on our perception of how someone else is feeling.
Yep.
So if I think that you are uncomfortable, I might send you back, or I might keep you there.
Okay.
And I'm actually not thinking about how I feel.
Sure.
I'm just projecting and thinking about how you feel. And all of this comes up of how much in our lives are we doing for someone else?
Yep. Yeah. Or projecting.
Or projecting.
Our insecurities, their insecurities, the masks, all that stuff.
How much am I really in tune with how I feel and what I want, and how comfortable I am? And so I was like, oh goodness.
What was it for you in that moment, if you could take us back there, where you were doing the forward, back, stop game? How did you respond? Because you said some people like cried, some people, where was your mentality and emotional state during that time?
I was pretty level.
Okay.
I did notice me really feeling into how the girl across from me was feeling, and trying to, I like to be good at things, right?
Sure.
So I was almost judging myself. Am I doing this right? You know?
So you weren't really in the moment for a second. You were still kind of out of your,
in my head.
Yeah.
Really in my head about it, but I was intending on doing it the right way, because I wanted my teacher, whoever, to be proud of me. You know what I mean? It's like takes you back to when you're a little kid.
Yep.
And so that just
so much going
showed
on.
me how much that I could learn on this trip, how much I was gonna really take away. I'll give you another example. The night that we got there, we were doing check-in. They said, come back at 4. We're gonna do kind of meet everybody. And I said, okay, great. Is there a schedule? And they were like, no, just come back at 4. And during our initial
mess with you a little bit, yeah.
Christine said, so you might notice there's no schedule. I was like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, that's for all you control freaks.
Yep.
So you can't plan out how you think you're going to feel about all these things and reading too much into it. Like, you just need to be here, be present, and let it happen. So those two things, just right out of the gate, I was like, okay, I am going to get more than I bargained for.
Yep.
And I mean, it just compounded over the days of how much we really got down to it, because there were men and women on this trip, and we got to do a lot of healing work around masculine and feminine energies, and like how we've been hurt in the past, and how we've hurt others. So it was just a very safe place to do that work. And I encourage anybody, if they feel led, to experience that in their own way, however they do that, because for me it was absolutely transformational.
How many total days were you in Maui?
I think I was there 6 full days.
6 full days.
Mm-hmm.
And then during this time there, all this healing and understandings going on, what were some other pivotal moments that you walked away from? Was that pretty much the biggest one, or did you have any other ones that were significant?
So every day we would start with movement of some kind, whether that be yoga or some other type of exercise. We were eating very clean too. And then we did breath work, which I had never done before.
Which kind were you doing?
I don't even know. I would have to look at the name of it. But for many people, they can have very transcendental experiences.
For sure.
And that gave me insight into how powerful my body is.
Yep.
And that we're looking outside of ourselves for answers.
And the answers are within.
And we have them.
Yep.
And we've always had them. And I was looking in the wrong place my whole life.
You were conditioned that way, though.
Yeah, and we all are.
Yeah.
But this gave me that awareness into very, very powerful experiences. There was a man, 65-year-old, 6'5", big guy, doctor on this trip, and he went there to support his wife, which was incredible. And there were a couple like physicians on the trip, and so especially when we got into the breathwork practice, it was interesting how they, in their minds were kind of trying to dissect it and break it down.
Yep.
And after his, he got up and we were in this small group kind of talking about our experiences, and he looked at his wife and he looked at me, and he's sitting in the in style, 6'5" guy, he's huge. He's like, do you see me right now? He's like, I haven't been able to cross my legs in 10 years.
Wow. Yep.
The arthritis and stuff in his knees, it's like he released all of this stuff.
Yep.
Because we hold emotion, we hold trauma in all these different parts of our body that we don't really know.
Yep.
And he had this incredible release that now it was like he was 20 years younger.
He was flexible again because he was flexible in his spirit.
Yeah, it was so amazing to see that. And yeah, that was huge for me. I'm trying to think of some others. I mean, there was anger release work that was powerful. We did that separately as men and women around different, like, masculine, whether it's a dad or a coworker or whoever that really had hurt us. And then the most powerful piece was having the men come in after that, and they had been doing their own thing separately, and they came in and they outwardly apologized for ways that they had hurt women in the past.
Nice.
And then we got to do that.
Yep.
And apologize for how we'd hurt men in the past. And that was very healing. I mean, and it was beautiful to see that people really not just supporting each other, but doing things most people never do. Like, doing this type of work is not what your neighbor is doing
it's not
down
the status
street.
quo.
Yeah,
and
it's really not.
It's because people, for many reasons, but a lot of times it's the people either don't know the techniques, they don't want to show their emotions, they've been conditioned not to do those things.
Yeah.
And when you're around like-minded people that are kind of growth-minded or working towards something, it's a lot easier to let down the guard, so to speak.
Yeah, there has to be an energy of safety.
For sure.
Which is, I do work with men and women, and creating that safe place to have those conversations and to go there within yourself is key. I mean, and I think has to. I think the beautiful thing about what I get to do is, for some people like you, who you said you went into some leadership coaching or something initially, because there's such a stigma around therapy, there's something that feels a little bit more comfortable with doing some kind of
For
coaching.
sure. It was completely a fraud. Like, it was me. It was me back in the day. Like, this is many years ago, like at least, I say many years ago, probably more like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe more, that I knew I needed help, but I was afraid to ask for it. Mm-hmm. And that's changed since then. But, there's a stigma, especially as a guy, right? That, like, oh, you're supposed to be able to handle things and do stuff, and like that's just not always true.
Yeah.
We weren't given the right coping mechanisms. We weren't shown the right ways to do things. And so having these people that are in the world nowadays that are becoming more prominent that share this stuff, it makes it easier for someone to make that decision versus kind of hiding.
Yeah. And what I love, Brene Brown says it perfectly, is vulnerability is really the prerequisite for courage.
We've talked about her a few times today between me and a couple of the podcast guests. It's funny that name's come up.
She's amazing.
She's legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she says, think of any act of courage and tell me that it didn't require vulnerability.
Yeah. Authenticity, vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and she was specifically talking, I think, to a military group. Think of any brother you have. Any person that ran into the line of duty willingly, does that not require a ton of vulnerability?
For sure.
And so I think specifically for men, that we've conditioned ourselves to think that that's weakness, you know, and to what I want to do is really help people to lead through and by with authenticity and vulnerability, because that's what makes corporate environment. I mean, how many of us have been in toxic work environments?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Where our leader is telling us to be one way, but they're not
living the truth
not
at all.
living it out.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so much trust. You can't have trust without vulnerability.
Yep.
So how can you lead and lead people without really tapping into that? And so
even for yourself too, there's a freedom in vulnerability. There's a freedom in honesty and in truth. I mean, if you're always playing the game of hiding and checking yourself because you may say something wrong or may come across the wrong way, I mean, it's tiring. Who the hell wants to do that all the time?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I remember specifically how exhausting it was. I mean, I said I was always had this mask on, and when I decided to put that down was very freeing. But it takes a lot of self-acceptance to do that, and to be willing
love for yourself.
Yeah, being willing to be judged, because that's, for many of us, why we pick up the mask in the first place, is because we're afraid of judgment, and we're afraid of what so-and-so is going to think. And
we're going to be judged no matter what. So at the end of the day, screw it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I've come to the realization of. And I've told you some of my story and the things that I've been through and either put myself through in my life. And I'm become the most grateful person in the world because I've been through those things. And the most self-aware and self-deprecating. I don't take myself too seriously, right? And I think that once I was able to show the world my scars, and actually I had an episode in my podcast, episode 29, where I put it out there and I just said, this is who I am, this is where I've been. The outpouring of love that I received from people that were you don't want to say fans, but people that were championing my cause, whether it was my business, my podcast, my life, it was insane. It was very humbling. It was very there's people that are listening that find value in this message, so you have to share it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, Marianne Williamson says it's not our darkness that most frightens us, it's our light that most frightens us. And it's when there's nothing about dumbing ourselves down or playing small that serves the world. It's when we really own our story, it liberates other people to do the same.
For sure.
And it allows them to find that connection point, the way that they relate to you. They might have a kid that is experiencing the same thing, or a brother or a friend or
someone
themselves,
they know.
and say, oh my God, you too?
Yep. The world becomes a much more inclusive place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I love the saying, you can't hate anybody from close up. If you knew that your story, my story, anyone's story, it takes away the judgment. You know what I mean? Because once you know somebody, it's hard to stay in that fearful place, because we're scared of what we don't know. Once we know, it's different. It helps us to understand and to be more empathetic and compassionate. So, yeah, I definitely agree that owning your truth is the best thing you can do.
I believe it, and living it and being okay with it. And so in all of this, you have a narrative of taking giant leaps and going all in on yourself and the process and growing and the healing, because a lot of this is healing, right? So that you can lead other people and you can show other people how to grow. And so to transition from this ongoing, can't really transition, but to kind of segue from the conversation standpoint of ongoing growth, where you were sleepwalking through life, you felt to awakening, right? To now you're serving other people. Talk a little bit about kind of the next step for you, where you started a podcast, started a business, and all these things.
Yeah. So it was kind of a light came on for me, and I was like, okay, I've been looking my whole life for my thing, my calling, my purpose. I was always multi-passionate. I never grew up and was I'm going to do this.
It's so hard to do that.
I
wanted to be a basketball player.
I was so envious of the people that just knew as a kid. That wasn't me. So I was always trying to find it where I fit. So once I did, I was I have to start now.
Yeah.
And so the best thing I could do was, how do I share my story? How do I and if that helps someone, great. How can I bottle up anything that's helped me and give it to people? So I started a podcast.
Yeah, talk about how the iteration came from like conversations around the dinner table. Like kind of that's where you got the mindset from it. Yeah.
I mean,
capturing gold.
There were just so many beautiful moments that I had shared with my dad and my mom, and growing up, I always knew we thought we were different a little bit. Like we thought differently. We had different conversations than most people do. Same, and I would seek that out in my friends and in my mentors. And I just was like, people need this. People are looking for this. Even if they don't know that they are, if you stumble upon it, it will be helpful. And that was kind of my mentality. I was like, how can I deliver it to people in a way that is through a medium that they already consume?
Yep.
And just kind of thought, what do I like?
Yeah.
Do I like reading books? Do I like listening to audiobooks? Do I like listening to podcasts? Do I like looking on YouTube? Like, I really did it from a selfish place of what do I like?
Sure.
So I created a podcast. I thought, how cool would it be? And I'm an action taker. So when I don't really ponder things too long.
You're an implementer. You're just right to a quick start. Yeah.
So I thought, oh, that'd be great. And then a month later, I was like, no, I'm going to do it.
Right.
We live in the information age. You can Google anything you want to
Sure.
and figure out the
YouTube
steps.
University.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, really. So did that, and then put out my first episode. I was still at my corporate job, and this is how I knew this is where it was leading me. Like, my mind would go somewhere else.
Yep.
It would go to the podcast. It would go to the message I wanted to share.
You weren't being present with what you weren't passionate about. You were thinking about what you really wanted to work on.
Yeah, and so I would suggest anybody that's kind of feels stuck or is uncertain about their next step or whatever, ask yourself, where does your mind go, in the middle of the day? Like, if you could be doing anything, how would you spend your time? And that's how I knew. I was like, okay, my energy and attention is somewhere else. So I did that, put out my story on the first episode, and got such incredible feedback.
Yep.
I was like, okay.
Was it just you telling your story?
Yeah, it was just me.
Awesome.
On the first episode. On the third, I brought in my dad, and we did
That's super cool.
a co-episode, which was really powerful.
What were some of the things you talked about with him?
Really just his experience with the same story.
Yep.
But
from his lens.
Yeah, but through his lens of what was it like to be a dad, of a keep everything together through the perspective of the family, leader, and how did he process? Did he allow himself to process? How, where was God for him in all of that? Where was the meaning? How did he stay sane with losing, all of the people that he lost?
Having your dad with you on that episode, probably impactful for both of you.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the things that you think that he walked away with.
Yeah, I mean, that was a bucket list thing for me to do something and collaborate in that way. I think hopefully we'll do more in the future, but if it was for no one else but for us, it was amazing. And I know I've gotten so much feedback from it. I know it's helped people. But for my dad, his experience of the same thing, two people can have the exact same experience and perceive it totally differently.
Much differently.
As a dad, one, having his daughter and then his wife go through these things, and he's at the mercy of what they're experiencing. He can't fix it. He can't control it. It's a nightmare.
Yep.
I think he and I both experienced my mom's sickness in a totally different way than we experienced Anna's. In the same way with my mom, she experienced her own illness differently. It was, some things that stuck out to me from that conversation with him was how much he really was just doing what had to be done to make sure we were taken care of and that everything was still happening because he was commuting like 3, sometimes 4 hours a day to go see them, to his job, back home. I mean, he was exhausted for long periods of time. For sure. And not really having another choice. This was just the season of life that we were in, and that was what was calling the shots. It wasn't about any of us anymore and what we wanted. It was about what had to be done. And so not having that choice really it was just adrenaline all the time.
Yep. Raw emotion, just.
Oh yeah. Just survival.
Yep.
And it wasn't until Mom died that he really started tapping into things and emotions that he had been suppressing. I think for the first time he wasn't a caregiver.
Yep.
And he just rested for a while and slept.
Yeah.
And his energy had been poured for so long. And then depression hit. And he had never experienced depression before. But he specifically said, I never knew if I would experience joy again.
Wow. Okay. And when was this podcast done?
It was done, I would say, in August.
Okay. So a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And how has his journey been since then?
He's my hero. He's the best man. Always has been. The epitome of sacrificial love for us. He's taught me a lot about what that means. Hearing him say that was not what any daughter wants to hear, of course. He met my mom when he was 19. He has never been alone before. Yep. And the way he described it was like, imagine being in prison for 35 years and then being thrown out in the middle of the street and say, go figure out life.
What do you do? Where do you go? Who do you contact? You don't know.
What do you do with your time? He's retired now. He retired to take care of her. I'm out of the house, fully sustaining life on my own. No one needs him. Yep. No one's calling.
Huge transition for him.
And so what is it? What now?
Yep.
So we were both experiencing this new version of ourselves. And to see him, he and I have always been close, but we've obviously grown so much more close. We'll geek out on metaphysical stuff and meditation and all these things. But he really started putting himself as a priority again, doing the things that he loved to do. He's a musician, he's a composer, he's a producer. He now flies out to LA and produces records that he loves to do, and is writing music, created his own studio in our house, and he's killing it and making and doing the things that he enjoys. Yep. And not feeling guilty for it, not because I think there's a bit of survivor's guilt that
for sure,
for both of us.
Why not me? And why how am I? Why do I get to live? All that stuff, and
that's a real feeling. And so, it's interesting. I had a very intuitive feeling about 2 months after my mom passed. And something told me that my dad deserved somebody else. Yep. And I thought to myself, I can't imagine being 58, living 20, 30 more years, and having to do that alone. Yep. How selfish of me or anyone else to think that someone else should have to do that. Nothing stirred it. Something just came on to me, and I started having that thought and that realization, and thinking I would be absolutely okay if my dad decided to date again, because he deserves a companion, he deserves a friend, he deserves whatever he wants. Sure. And that doesn't take away from who my mom was, or what she meant to us, or what she meant to him. Yeah. And it was so interesting. The next day, I had that experience with myself. He came to me and he said, your opinion is the only one that matters, but how would you feel? Yeah. And it was just so beautiful, because I knew exactly how I felt about it. So he's in a really, really good place. He's happy, really happy. He has a girlfriend. We all celebrated our first holiday together.
Awesome.
We're just creating new memories and having, being really present and embracing what we have right now in this season of life.
Is this time tough, the holidays? Thinking back, in terms of
it is,
loved
because
ones?
my mom was such a party thrower and such an entertainer, and she just made our home really warm. And so it is, but at the same time, we make a very big effort to include she and all and Anna and everybody and their energy into what we do.
Yeah,
and,
that's huge.
yeah, make sure that it feels like
they're still, because they are. Their energy still is. My sons, we always go, my daughter that we lost, we have a grave site in Charlotte where we used to live, and every time we're out there to go see my sister-in-law, my sister, my brother-in-law, and nephew who live out there, we go see them for Thanksgiving every year. They come see us for Christmas. So we're going back and forth to Charlotte a few times a year. And we always stop by her site, and we always like change out the flowers that are there, and like they buy little things, like, well, we buy them and they pick them out, and like they just make it a point to talk about their sister in heaven, and like just like, you know, what that meant. And so they're 5 and 3, but they know they have a sister that's no longer here on earth, but they still celebrate with us because we kept that memory alive. And so for her birthday in March every year, we do a balloon release kind of thing, and like all that stuff. So it's important to do that.
Yeah, we light a candle and have it there. But yeah, their energy is with us all the time. And there's certain things that I do that takes me right back to being with them and being around them. And one of the most beautiful things that both of them embodied was just very much a sense of compassion and openness to everybody, and that we're all connected on a deeper level than just. There's some readings that I've been into recently that talk about how we are essentially, there's pieces of us and other people, so we're all connected in a sense. So like you're hurting yourself if you're hurting somebody else kind of thing. And there's just like this whole kind of, we talked about the woo-woo kind of side of things. And but yeah, it's true. I mean, you got to make sure that you know, I don't know what the train of thought's going, but basically you want to make sure that like you don't hurt other people because you end up hurting yourself. So now moving forward past kind of the first few episodes of the podcast, and then now getting into it deeper with the podcast, shifting gears with the business side of things, with your coaching business, with Coachable. How are you serving people there, and what has that experience been like for you? And then them. Yeah. So I quit my 6-figure job, you know, with no really business to speak of, really a dream and a fire and a knowing. And I hired a business coach who had successfully built an incredible brand and business online.
You could model some of your things after what they did, and they could help fast forward the process.
Yeah. She's in a different space, but definitely has a framework that is.
Can you name drop, or do you not want to?
That is, I can implement. Yeah. Her name's Isabella Silverio. She has something called the Guava Boss Mastermind. So I'm really into masterminding with other people. And she's been instrumental in getting me kicked off in the last 3 months. So I went from having no clients, no programs, no offers, to having being almost totally booked out.
That's huge.
I'm about to launch my first group program in the middle of January. Right now I do one-on-one coaching. I do intensives, like 90-minute intensives, where we really focus on one particular mental block or limiting belief that you have going on, specifically in business. I do that with a lot of other coaches, entrepreneurs, business owners. I've been approached multiple times. I'm working on building out a corporate program because this is a methodology and a mindset shift, paradigm shift that isn't really happening in corporations, but will totally change the construct of how their teams are performing and relating to their work. Because take a law firm, for instance, what do you say with a senior associate who's burnt out, who's working crazy hours, that's trying to make partner? How do you come back the next day ready to work when you get reamed out for something on a case or by a client? How do you come back from that? And how do you maintain that momentum? And how do you sustain that for a career? These are the things that I help people with. And then on the one-on-one side, we definitely get into some deeper healing work where we kind of uncover the limiting beliefs that they have and how that's really holding them back, and do a lot of that paradigm shifting of reframing the story into something that is powerful, and empowering them to move forward and through that, and see see things from a different perspective.
So in terms of tools and techniques, what are some of the processes you can implement and have them work on this with you? Like, is there a system that you have that you go to? Did you create this? Is it a system that's been existing? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I pull from is existing stuff.
Yep.
That's transformed my life. And that,
so you're the case study in a sense.
Yeah, I'm my own experiment, and I go full on into it. There's so many things depending on what we're talking about, but like just right out of the bat, like out of the gate, you can't hit a target you can't see.
Right.
So if you don't know,
things.
If you don't have clarity on where you are, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there, you can't, like, you're just going to be treading water. And so
surviving.
Yeah. And wasting energy. And outside of your time, your energy is the only other thing that, you do not want to be wasting and you can't get back. And is really going to perpetuate the results in your life and the momentum that you have. And that can either go in a positive direction or in a negative direction. I mean, just take your thoughts, for instance. You start down with one negative thought and then you find yourself thinking, oh gosh, well, my wife's going to divorce me and I'm going to be homeless and I'm going to be this. You're just like, how did I get there with this one thought? It's the same way. So a lot of times it's just, where are you? What's the goal? And are we looking on, like, I think there's a goal line in life and there's a soul line in life. So are we specifically talking about a goal that you want to achieve in the next year with your business? Is it a revenue goal? Is it, I want to be, whatever it is you want to do. Really getting clear on that, speaking that out, and then coming up with a plan of what it looks like to get there. A lot of times people get coaches just for the accountability. Sure. Because they aren't willing to show up for themselves and do the work on their own. Others need help, like you're like, I don't even know what I need. Yeah. So I'm just here, or I don't know where to start. And so much of it is getting down to, what is your why? Why do you do what you do? And once we start unpacking that, a lot of times it leaves people a little lost initially because they've realized that a lot of what they're doing isn't for them. Yep. Yeah.
So that goal line and soul line, how do those come together? Do they ever come together? Do they not,
Yeah, absolutely. I think some people live their whole lives focused on the goal line of life. And then they realize, well, shit, like, there's this whole other axis that I've been ignoring that matters a lot. And then that's why you see so many people on their deathbed and you ask them, what would you tell somebody?
It's like, I regret.
I regret. And because that was my experience, that was not, I wanted to do anything possible not to have that be my story. Then there are others that stay very, very focused on the soul line of life, very much in flow, very much letting things manifest and come to them as they will. And I don't want to do anything that doesn't feel good and all these things. So much to be learned there. But find themselves not making the progress that they want to make. And so it's a dance. It's a balance of yin and yang, masculine, feminine, flow and grind, hustle.
Bringing it all together.
Yeah, and really bringing it all together, because otherwise it's a pendulum. You know what I mean? One, it's going to come back, and you might find yourself in a season where you're really, really hustling and grinding it out, which society, I think, praises a lot.
They call it hustle porn now. Like, it's just like supposed to be like work your face off.
Who's willing to work the most?
Right.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah.
That I value. It's like, what do you value? For me, a work-life balance, I think this is something millennials get a bad rep about, but I don't want to work until my eyes bleed.
No.
You know what I mean? No. And so I make an effort to find that healthy balance of creating a life that gives me the freedom that I want. And I think so many people have missed the message that their life belongs to them. And that they don't need permission to do what they want to do or create the freedom they want to have or whatever it is. And so taking that radical ownership and responsibility for their own happiness, their own satisfaction is really where it starts. Because otherwise, if we're blaming our situation, our circumstance, whatever, on everybody else, we've given our power away.
Yep.
You know, we can't make any change. We can't force somebody else to change. It just starts with us.
And you shouldn't even ask them to, right?
Yeah.
So as far as everything you've brought to the table today, there's so much that they can help people, and there's so much that they can learn from and they can grow with. And two things. So what would you say as a go-home message for people that are listening or watching today, as far as getting through something, getting over something, working towards something, any of those kinds of things? Like, what would be a go-home message for someone today?
Yeah, I would say think about what you think about. Take a second to actually think about the thoughts that you have on a daily basis, the repetitive chatter in your head, because that chatter are the thoughts that you think, which then become the feelings that you feel, which become the actions that you take, and then end up in the results that you
manifest
have.
it. Yeah.
And so if you can be conscious of your thoughts, realize that you are not those thoughts, that you are the thinker of them, you're observing them, and that you can change them into a more powerful story, you can totally change your life.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So it's all about the mindset.
100%.
As far as getting in touch with you, finding more about your work, the podcast, tell the world.
Yeah, you can find me at You're Welcome Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find me on Instagram at Coach Tori Gordon. And yeah, my website will be launching in a couple weeks. It's going to be torigordon.com. So please reach out to me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. She's the amazing, powerful, mighty. It's my pleasure. Tori Gordon, coach extraordinaire. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of The Jesse T Show.